Get her away from the ceremony before she ruins. The words echoed across the crowded square, and for a moment, every conversation stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward Eloan Ashcroft. She stood frozen at the edge of the Blood Moon Festival, clutching a basket of silver ribbons against her chest. Heat rushed into her face. Around her, people whispered openly. Some shook their heads. Others simply looked away, as though standing too close to her might bring misfortune. Eloan lowered her gaze and forced herself to keep walking. She had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. Above the square, crimson banners fluttered between stone buildings. Lanterns swayed gently in the cool autumn breeze. The entire kingdom of Valemore had gathered for the most important celebration of the year. Music filled the streets. Merchants sold pastries dusted with sugar. Children laughed while chasing one another through the crowd. It should have felt magical. Instead, Eloan felt like a ghost wandering through someone else's happiness. At 19 years old, she was the only wolf in the territory whose wolf had never awakened. Every child in Valemore shifted before adulthood. Every child except her. The first year, people had been concerned. The second year, they had become suspicious. By the third, most had settled on a simple explanation. Eloan was cursed. No law declared her an outcast. No official proclamation existed. Yet everyone understood the invisible rules. She was never invited to important gatherings. Mothers quietly pulled their children closer when she passed. Young wolves avoided standing beside her during ceremonies. Even the marketplace vendors often served others before acknowledging she was waiting. The rejection had become so constant that sometimes Eloan wondered if she imagined what acceptance felt like. Moon cursed. The insult drifted through the crowd behind her. A few people laughed softly. Eloan tightened her grip on the basket and continued toward the festival pavilion. She had volunteered to help decorate despite knowing she would not be welcomed. Work kept her mind occupied. Work hurt less than loneliness. When she arrived at the pavilion, several young women were already arranging flowers around the ceremonial platform. Eloan stepped forward to offer the ribbons. Before she could speak, one of the organizers blocked her path. "Leave them there," the woman said quickly. "We already have enough people helping." Eloan glanced around. Half the tables remained unfinished. "I can still help." The organizer forced a smile that never reached her eyes. "That will not be necessary." The meaning was clear. Again, Eloan nodded silently and set the basket down. As she turned away, she overheard another woman whispering nearby. "Why does she keep coming? Maybe she still thinks she belongs here." The words struck harder than she expected. Not because they were cruel, because part of her feared they were right. She wandered toward the outskirts of the square where fewer people gathered. The festival continued without her. It always did. Near the fountain, Rowan Blackthorn stood surrounded by friends. Tall, confident, and admired by nearly everyone in Valemore, Rowan rarely missed an opportunity to remind Eloan of her place. The moment he spotted her, a grin spread across his face. "Look who decided to join us." Several people turned immediately. Rowan stepped forward. "Tell me something, Eloan." His voice carried easily through the crowd. "When exactly does your wolf plan to arrive?" Laughter erupted around him. Eloan remained silent. Rowan continued. 19 years seems like a long delay." More laughter followed. Someone muttered, "Maybe it got lost." Even louder laughter answered. Eloan felt every eye in the square upon her. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the ground to swallow her whole. Instead, she simply nodded once and walked away. Behind her, the laughter continued. No one defended her. No one told Rowan to stop. That hurt most of all. As the afternoon slowly faded into evening, silver clouds gathered above the distant hills. One by one, lanterns illuminated the streets. The Blood Moon Festival entered its most sacred hours. Wolves dressed in their finest clothing gathered near the ceremonial platform, while musicians played beneath the stars. Eloan watched from a distance. Not because she enjoyed watching, because she still hoped to feel included, even if only for a moment. Then she heard two elders speaking nearby. "It is a shame about that girl." "Which one?" "The Ashcroft girl." A pause followed. "Yes, some people simply are not chosen." Eloan swallowed hard. Something inside her finally broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, quietly, like a thread stretched too tight for too long. Without speaking to anyone, she turned and walked away from the celebration. Past the lanterns, past the music, past the laughing crowds. The path carried her toward the hill overlooking Valemore, toward the place she visited whenever the loneliness became too heavy to carry. Above her, moonlight spilled across the ancient branches waiting in silence. And for the first time in 500 years, the forgotten tree was about to wake. The glow vanished so quickly that Aloan wondered if exhaustion had finally begun playing tricks on her mind. She stared at the ancient bark beneath her fingertips, her pulse quickening in the silence. The tree stood motionless once more, its silver trunk bathed in moonlight, offering no sign that anything unusual had happened. For several seconds, she did not move. Then, slowly, she pulled her hand away. Nothing. No light. No warmth. No answer. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Of course. Why would something miraculous happen to her? She lowered herself onto one of the massive roots and wrapped her arms around her knees. Below the hill, the kingdom celebrated beneath thousands of lanterns. Music drifted upward on the night breeze. Somewhere people were dancing. Somewhere families were laughing. Somewhere young wolves were discovering futures filled with hope. Aloan felt separated from all of it by an invisible wall. She had spent so many years feeling different that loneliness had become familiar. Yet tonight felt strangely heavier. The questions she carried seemed larger than ever. She closed her eyes and remembered her mother. The memories were faint now. A gentle voice, warm hands, soft laughter beside a fireplace. Her mother had passed away when Aloan was only 8 years old, leaving behind little more than scattered memories and a small silver pendant she had worn every day since. Many nights Aloan found herself wishing she could ask her mother the questions no one else could answer. Why had she never shifted? Why did she feel disconnected from the pack? Why did she sometimes dream of places she had never seen? A sudden gust of wind swept across the hill. Leaves rustled overhead. Aloan opened her eyes. For a brief moment, she thought she saw silver light flicker among the branches high above. Not moonlight. Something else. Something alive. Her breath caught. Then it disappeared. She stood quickly. The tree remained still. Yet an uneasy feeling lingered deep inside her chest. Not fear. Anticipation. As though something had awakened and was now quietly waiting. The sensation followed her all the way down the hill. When she reached the festival grounds, the celebration had grown even larger. Lanterns floated overhead like tiny stars. Long wooden tables overflowed with food. Musicians filled the square with lively melodies. Aloan tried to slip through unnoticed, but whispers followed her immediately. They always did. She kept her head down and moved toward the edge of the crowd. Then she heard a familiar voice. There she is. Rowan Blackthorn stepped forward, flanked by several friends. Their expensive festival clothes contrasted sharply with Aloan's simple gray dress. Rowan folded his arms and smiled. Enjoying the festivities alone? A few nearby wolves laughed quietly. Aloan did not answer. She continued walking. You know, Rowan continued, raising his voice slightly. My uncle says the moon goddess hides blessings inside every wolf. He glanced at his friends. Maybe she simply forgot yours. More laughter followed. Aloan felt the sting of humiliation, but tonight something felt different. The words still hurt, yet they seemed distant somehow, less powerful than before, as though another voice existed somewhere beneath the pain, whispering that Rowan did not know the truth. The realization startled her. She had no reason to believe it. No evidence. No explanation. And yet the feeling remained. Rowan eventually lost interest and turned back toward the celebration. Aloan continued through the crowd until she reached a quiet corner near the old stone well. There she noticed someone watching her. An elderly woman sat alone on a wooden bench. Her silver hair reflected the lantern light. Her eyes were sharp and unusually bright. Aloan recognized her immediately. Maeve Holloway, the oldest resident in Valemore. Many considered her eccentric. Others claimed she knew forgotten stories older than the kingdom itself. Maeve gestured toward the empty space beside her. Come sit. Aloan hesitated before obeying. For a while neither spoke. The festival music echoed across the square. Finally, Maeve smiled faintly. You went to the hill tonight. Aloan froze. How did you know? Because the wind changed. The old woman's answer sounded perfectly serious. And because I have spent 90 years paying attention. Aloan frowned. I do not understand. Maeve studied her carefully. No, not yet. The answer only deepened the mystery. What happened up there? Aloan asked quietly. The elderly woman looked toward the distant hill where the ancient tree stood beneath the moonlit sky. Her expression softened. "Tell me something first," she said. "When you touched it, what did you feel?" Aloan's heartbeat quickened. "Warmth." Maeve nodded slowly as though confirming something she had long suspected. "Then it has begun." "What has begun?" But Maeve never answered, because at that exact moment a bright silver light appeared high above the hill. Every conversation in the square stopped. Every musician fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward the ancient tree, and for the first time in 5 centuries, a single silver blossom opened among its branches. The silver blossom remained suspended among the branches like a tiny star that had fallen from the heavens. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire festival stood frozen beneath the lantern light, their attention fixed on the distant hill. Aloan could hear her own breathing. Slow, uneven, disbelieving. Around her, whispers began spreading through the crowd. At first they were cautious. Then they multiplied. Questions bounced from person to person. Some claimed it was a reflection of the moon. Others insisted it was a trick of the light. But deep down, everyone knew they had witnessed something impossible. The ancient tree had changed. Maeve Holloway never took her eyes from the hill. 500 years, the old woman murmured softly. 500 years of silence. Aloan swallowed. What does it mean? Maeve finally looked at her. There was no amusement in her expression now. No mystery. Only certainty. It means the stories were true. Before Aloan could ask another question, voices erupted nearby. Several town elders were already hurrying toward the hill, followed by curious festival guests. Others pointed excitedly toward the glowing blossom. The atmosphere had transformed completely. Moments earlier the festival had been filled with music and celebration. Now it felt charged with anticipation. Like the air before a storm, Aloan suddenly felt exposed. Her stomach tightened. Nobody knew she had touched the tree. Nobody except Maeve. Yet she could not shake the feeling that somehow the truth would find its way into the open. She rose from the bench. "I should go." Maeve nodded slowly. "Perhaps. You are not coming?" The old woman smiled faintly. "I have waited many years. One more night will not hurt me." The answer made little sense, but Aloan was too distracted to question it. She slipped away from the square and made her way home through narrow streets lit by silver lanterns. Yet even as she walked, she could feel excitement spreading throughout Valemore. People stood outside their homes discussing the blossom. Groups gathered at intersections. Every conversation seemed connected to the same impossible event. By the time Aloan reached her cottage, rumors had already begun growing larger than the truth itself. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it. Silence greeted her. The small house felt emptier than ever. Moonlight spilled through the window and illuminated the worn furniture her mother had once used. Aloan's gaze drifted toward the silver pendant resting against her chest. Without thinking, she touched it. The metal felt unusually warm. Her heartbeat quickened. She pulled the pendant away from her skin and examined it carefully. It looked exactly the same. A simple silver design surrounding a pale crystal. Something her mother had insisted she wear every day. Nothing more. Yet tonight the crystal seemed to contain a faint glow deep within its center. Aloan blinked. The glow vanished instantly. She let out a frustrated sigh. First the tree. Now this. Exhaustion had to be affecting her senses. She prepared for bed and tried to sleep. But sleep refused to come. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the blossom opening among the branches. She heard Maeve's words repeating inside her mind. The stories were true. Hours passed. Outside, the kingdom slowly grew quiet. Then sometime after midnight, a strange dream found her. She stood within an endless forest unlike anything she had ever seen. Towering silver trees stretched toward a sky filled with stars. Gentle light flowed across the ground like water. In the distance stood a figure she could not clearly see. Tall, motionless. Watching her, Aloan tried to move closer. The figure remained hidden behind the silver light. Then a voice echoed through the forest. Not loud, not frightening, simply powerful. At last, the words sent a shiver through her entire body. Suddenly, every tree around her burst into silver blossoms. Light filled the world. Aloan woke with a gasp. Morning sunlight streamed through her window. Her heart raced. The dream felt more real than any she had experienced before. She sat upright, and rubbed her eyes. Then she heard shouting outside. Not angry shouting. Excited shouting. Curious, she hurried to the window. Villagers filled the street. Everyone seemed to be moving toward the hill. Aloan stepped outside just as a young messenger ran past. "Another blossom," he yelled. "The tree has another blossom." Her breath caught. 2 blossoms. After 500 years. Fear and fascination battled inside her. Something was happening. Something far bigger than herself. Yet she could not shake the feeling that somehow she stood at the center of it. As the crowd rushed toward the hill once more, Aloan reached for the pendant hanging around her neck. This time the crystal did not merely feel warm. It pulsed softly against her palm like a living heartbeat. The morning after the second blossom appeared should have been the happiest day Vale Moor had seen in generations. Instead, Aloan Ashcroft found herself standing alone in the center of the council hall, while dozens of people discussed her as though she were not even there. Sunlight streamed through tall stained-glass windows, painting silver patterns across the stone floor. The room buzzed with nervous voices. Council members argued. Elders exchanged worried glances. Scholars filled notebooks with observations. No one seemed interested in what Aloan actually thought. "The timing cannot be ignored," one elder declared. "The blossoms appeared after she was seen near the tree." Another frowned. "That does not mean she caused it." "Then explain the pendant. Explain the dreams. Explain why the flowers continue multiplying." Aloan stood quietly beside the wall, wishing she could disappear. Only 3 days ago, these same people barely acknowledged her existence. Now they treated her like the center of a mystery none of them understood. Neither experience felt particularly pleasant. The discussion continued for nearly an hour. Some believed she had been blessed. Others feared she had somehow disturbed forces that should have remained asleep. Every theory made Aloan feel more isolated than before. Finally, council leader Edwin Mercer raised his hand for silence. "Until we understand what is happening, we must be cautious." Several elders nodded immediately. Edwin turned toward Aloan. "For the next few days, it would be best if you remained away from the hill." The words landed harder than she expected. "Away from the hill?" Edwin cleared his throat. "Only temporarily. The tree reacted when she was there." Another elder added. "If more changes occur, we need to determine whether she is connected." Aloan stared at them. "You think I did something wrong?" No one answered directly. The silence itself felt like an answer. A knot formed in her chest. Even after witnessing miracles, they still looked at her with suspicion first. Maeve Holloway rose slowly from her seat. "You are making a mistake." One elder sighed. "We are trying to protect the territory." "No," Maeve replied calmly. "You are trying to protect yourselves from uncertainty." The room fell quiet. Nobody challenged her. Yet nobody changed their minds either. The meeting ended shortly afterward. As Aloan stepped outside, the bright morning felt colder than before. Villagers gathered in small groups throughout the square, discussing the blossoms. Many stopped talking when she passed. Some smiled politely. Others stared openly. The attention felt unbearable. She had never wanted fame. She had never wanted prophecy. She had only wanted a place where she belonged. As she crossed the square, Rowan Blackthorn approached from the opposite direction. For once, he was not smiling. "I heard what happened." Aloan continued walking. "Congratulations." The words sounded awkward coming from him. She stopped. "Congratulations?" Rowan rubbed the back of his neck uncomfortably. "You know what I mean." "No, I do not." He hesitated. "Everyone keeps saying you are special now." Aloan laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. 3 days ago, everyone said I was cursed." Rowan looked away. The truth of her words lingered between them. Aloan did not wait for a response. She kept walking until the town disappeared behind her. By afternoon, she found herself standing near the edge of the forest. The quiet felt like relief. Leaves rustled overhead. Sunlight filtered through towering branches. For the first time all day, she could breathe without feeling watched. Yet even here, her thoughts refused to settle. The pendant resting against her chest remained warm. The crystal pulsed faintly every few minutes. Sometimes she imagined she could hear distant whispers inside the rhythm. Not words. Feelings. Ancient and patient. She wandered deeper into the woods until she reached a familiar clearing overlooking the hill. The great tree stood in the distance, magnificent beneath the sky. Hundreds of silver blossoms shimmered among its branches. Aloan stared at it for a long time. "Why me?" she whispered. The forest remained silent. Then a sudden breeze swept through the clearing. The pendant flared with warmth, stronger than ever before. Eloan gasped and grabbed the crystal. At the same moment, far across the valley, every blossom upon the tree brightened. Silver light raced through the branches like flowing starlight. The entire hillside glowed. Eloan's eyes widened. The tree was responding again. Not to fear, not to doubt, to her. And before she could take another breath, a single beam of silver light descended from the highest branch and reached toward the forest where she stood. The beam of silver light stopped only a few feet from Eloan. She stood motionless in the forest clearing, her breath caught somewhere between fear and wonder. The light did not blind her. It did not burn. Instead, it hovered quietly in the air like a living thing deciding whether it could trust her. Around her, the woods had become unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed to have paused. Eloan slowly lowered her hand from the pendant. The crystal resting against her chest pulsed in response to the glowing beam. Once, twice, then both rhythms synchronized perfectly. A strange warmth spread through her body. Not overwhelming, not frightening, familiar, as though something she had lost long ago had finally found its way back. Miles away, the people gathered around the hill watched in amazement as the silver light remained connected to the distant forest. Rumors spread instantly. Some believed the tree was communicating. Others insisted an ancient prophecy was unfolding before their eyes. No one truly understood what they were witnessing. Yet for the first time, the conversation sounded different. The fear had begun fading. Curiosity was replacing it. Respect was beginning to replace suspicion. Back in the clearing, Eloan took a cautious step forward. The beam responded immediately, brightening slightly. Then dozens of tiny silver lights emerged from the surrounding trees. They drifted through the air like floating stars. Eloan turned slowly, watching them gather around her. The sight was breathtaking. One small light settled briefly upon her shoulder before dissolving into sparkling dust. Another circled her wrist before disappearing. None of them felt threatening. They felt welcoming. For the first time since everything began, Eloan felt something she had not experienced in years. Peace. Then a familiar voice called her name. Eloan. She turned toward the sound. Maeve Holloway emerged from the trees, breathing harder than usual from the long walk. Behind her came Edwin Mercer and several council members. They stopped abruptly when they saw the glowing lights surrounding Eloan. No one spoke. The scene seemed too extraordinary for words. Finally, Edwin stepped forward. We followed the beam. His voice sounded far less certain than usual. Eloan glanced toward the hill visible beyond the trees. The silver connection remained intact. I do not know what is happening, she admitted. Maeve smiled gently. Perhaps that is because this was never meant to be understood all at once. One of the council members stared at the floating lights. They are not gathering around anyone else. The observation settled heavily over the group. For the first time, nobody looked at Eloan as though she might be the cause of a problem. They looked at her as though she might be part of an answer. The difference mattered more than she expected. Then something remarkable happened. The beam connecting the tree and the forest slowly dissolved. The floating lights rose higher into the sky. At first there were dozens, then hundreds. Soon the entire valley shimmered with silver light. People throughout Valemore stepped outside to watch. Children pointed upward in amazement. Elders removed their hats respectfully. Travelers stopped along distant roads. The lights drifted across the territory before gently descending toward the hill. When they touched the ancient branches, new blossoms appeared. Not hundreds, thousands. Gasps echoed from every direction. The tree transformed before their eyes. What had once appeared ancient and dormant now looked vibrant and alive. Silver flowers covered nearly every branch. The hillside glowed so brightly it could be seen for miles. Eloan stared in disbelief. How is this possible? Maeve's eyes glistened with emotion. Because some things awaken when they are finally found. The words lingered in Eloan's mind. Finally found. Before she could ask what Maeve meant, a young messenger came running up the forest path. He looked exhausted. Council leader, he called. More riders have arrived. Edwin frowned. From where? Everywhere. The messenger struggled to catch his breath. Neighboring territories. Scholars. Merchants. Nobles. He swallowed hard. And there is more. Everyone waited. The silver light was seen hundreds of miles beyond our borders. Silence followed. Even Edwin looked unsettled. The messenger continued. Some say the signal reached kingdoms beyond the mountains. Eloan felt the pendant pulse sharply against her chest, stronger than ever before. A strange sensation flickered through her heart. Brief, powerful, almost like the awareness of another presence far away. Someone who had suddenly become aware of her existence. The feeling vanished almost instantly, yet it left certainty behind. Somewhere beyond the horizon, events had already begun moving toward Valemore, and neither she nor anyone else could stop them now. More than 600 miles away, beyond the forests, rivers, and mountain ranges that separated kingdoms, Kaelin Dravenheart stood alone on the highest balcony of Blackthorn Citadel. The fortress overlooked endless peaks wrapped in silver mist. Far below, banners bearing the royal crest moved gently in the afternoon wind. Normally, the Alpha King welcomed solitude. It allowed him to think without interruption. Today, however, peace shattered without warning. A sudden pressure struck the center of his chest. Not pain, not illness. Something older, something deeper. Kaelin gripped the stone railing as a wave of unfamiliar emotion swept through him. Loneliness, hope, fear, determination. Feelings that did not belong to him. His silver eyes narrowed. For years, he had felt nothing resembling a mate bond. Most believed it would never happen. Some whispered that the moon goddess had chosen to leave him unmated forever. Kaelin himself had stopped questioning it long ago. Yet now something had changed. The sensation returned stronger than before. Warmth spread through his chest like sunlight breaking through winter clouds. Images flashed across his mind. Silver blossoms, ancient roots, a pair of emerald eyes filled with uncertainty. Then everything vanished. The Alpha King straightened slowly. His heartbeat had not raced like this in years. Behind him, the balcony doors opened. Lord Cassian Thornvale stepped outside carrying several scrolls. As the king's advisor, he rarely showed surprise. Today was an exception. Your Majesty, Cassian said carefully. The northern watchtowers have reported something unusual. Kaelin turned. What happened? Cassian hesitated. A beam of silver light appeared approximately 600 miles southeast of our territory. The king's expression hardened. How long ago? Only minutes. Silence stretched between them. Kaelin looked toward the distant horizon. He knew immediately that the report was connected to what he had just experienced. Somehow he knew. Logic offered no explanation. Instinct did not require one. Cassian studied him closely. You felt it. It was not a question. Kaelin gave a single nod. The advisor's eyes widened slightly. After all these years? Yes. The word barely left his mouth before another pulse surged through the bond. This time the connection sharpened. Somewhere far away, a young woman stood surrounded by uncertainty. She did not understand what was happening. She was frightened. Yet beneath the fear existed remarkable courage. Kaelin could feel it. The realization unsettled him more than any battlefield ever had. He knew nothing about her. Not her name. Not her face. Yet the bond felt undeniable. Real. Ancient. As though destiny itself had awakened from a long sleep. Prepare my horse, Kaelin said. Cassian blinked. Your Majesty? Now. You intend to leave the capital? Immediately. The advisor looked genuinely alarmed. The royal council will object. Then they may object. Cassian opened his mouth, then wisely closed it. He had served Kaelin long enough to recognize when a decision could not be changed. Within the hour, word spread through Blackthorn Citadel. Servants hurried through marble corridors. Royal guards assembled in the courtyard. Messengers rushed to deliver urgent notices. Confusion followed wherever the news traveled. The Alpha King rarely left the capital without weeks of preparation. Yet today he appeared ready to ride across the continent after receiving nothing more than a mysterious feeling. Meanwhile, inside the council chamber, several nobles demanded explanations. Kaelin offered none. He stood before the enormous map covering the far wall and studied the southeastern territories. Hundreds of settlements existed within that region. Dozens of kingdoms. Countless forests. Finding one person should have been impossible. Yet every instinct told him exactly where to begin. His gaze settled on a remote territory called Valemore. Something inside him stirred immediately. Recognition. Certainty. There, he said quietly. Cassian followed his gaze. You believe the source came from Valemore? Kaelin did not answer right away. The bond pulsed once more. Soft. Steady. Like a heartbeat echoing across the world. For the first time, he felt something else as well. A faint sensation of wonder. Whoever she was, she had witnessed something extraordinary. I do not believe it, Kalen finally replied. I know it. Outside the chamber windows, the afternoon sun reflected across distant mountains. Far beyond them, a forgotten girl stood at the center of a mystery neither kingdom yet understood. And somewhere deep beneath Blackthorn Citadel, sealed behind doors untouched for generations, an ancient crystal hidden within the royal archives suddenly began to glow. The council chamber of Valemore had never felt so crowded. Every seat was occupied. Elders stood along the walls. Scholars filled entire rows. Messengers moved constantly between doors carrying reports from neighboring territories. Aloan sat quietly at the far end of the long wooden table, wishing she could disappear. Only 3 days earlier, nobody had cared where she sat. Now dozens of eyes followed her every movement. The attention felt overwhelming. Across the chamber, Council Leader Edwin Mercer unrolled another parchment and frowned. Reports continue arriving from every direction, he announced. Travelers witnessed the silver light more than 400 miles away. Several territories are already sending representatives. Murmurs spread through the room. Aloan lowered her gaze. She still struggled to understand how any of this connected to her. The blossoms, the pendant, the dreams. None of it seemed real. Yet each hour brought new proof that something extraordinary was unfolding. Beside her, Maeve Holloway remained unusually silent. The old woman watched the discussions with calm patience, as though she had expected every development. Aloan leaned closer. You know more than you are saying. Maeve smiled faintly. That has always been true. Then tell me what is happening. Before the older woman could answer, the chamber doors burst open. A young messenger hurried inside, breathing heavily from exertion. Another sign, he said. The hill. Every conversation stopped immediately. Edwin rose from his chair. What happened? The messenger swallowed. The roots are glowing. Within minutes, the entire council had abandoned the meeting and rushed toward the hill. Aloan followed with the others. The streets overflowed with anxious residents. Children sat on rooftops, trying to see above the crowds. Shopkeepers left their businesses unattended. Everyone moved toward the same destination. When they finally reached the summit, a collective gasp swept through the gathering. Silver light flowed beneath the earth around the great tree. Ancient roots stretched across the hillside like living rivers of light. The glow pulsed steadily. Slow, powerful, alive. Aloan stared in amazement. She had walked this hill hundreds of times. Yet now it looked completely transformed. The air itself felt different. Warmer somehow. Filled with energy she could not explain. Then the pendant around her neck pulsed again. Stronger than ever. The crystal brightened. Several nearby villagers noticed immediately. Their whispers returned. Aloan heard fragments of conversation. Chosen. Blessed. Royal. Dangerous. The words unsettled her. She had spent years being ignored. Now people were assigning meanings to her existence she did not understand. Suddenly, a young girl stepped forward from the crowd. She could not have been older than 10. Without hesitation, she offered Aloan a small bouquet of wildflowers. For good luck, the girl said shyly. Aloan blinked in surprise. For me? The child nodded. My grandmother says the tree likes you. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. Not cruel laughter. Warm laughter. For the first time in years, Aloan felt something unfamiliar. Acceptance. The feeling nearly brought tears to her eyes. Before she could thank the girl properly, another disturbance drew everyone's attention. 3 riders approached from the eastern road. Their horses carried the colors of a neighboring territory. Behind them came more riders. Then more. Representatives from distant settlements had already begun arriving. News was spreading far faster than anyone anticipated. Edwin watched the growing procession with concern. This is becoming larger than Valemore. Maeve nodded. It always was. The old woman turned toward Aloan. And it is only beginning. The statement sent a chill through her. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, travelers continued arriving. Some came seeking answers. Others came seeking opportunity. A few came simply because they believed history was unfolding before their eyes. Yet among the growing crowd, one figure drew particular attention. A hooded scholar from the southern kingdoms arrived carrying ancient records bound in silver leather. He requested immediate access to the council archives. Hours later, as sunset painted the sky gold and crimson, He emerged pale and shaken. The legends were incomplete, he whispered. What legends? Edwin demanded. The scholar looked directly toward Aloan. Fear and wonder filled his expression. The stories never said the awakening would happen alone. Silence spread across the hill. The wind stirred the blossoms overhead. Then, far beyond the mountains to the north, a distant howl echoed across the evening sky. Not threatening, not sorrowful, powerful, ancient. Every wolf on the hill froze. Every instinct within them recognized the sound immediately. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a king was coming. The howl faded into the distance, yet its presence lingered over Valemore long after the sound itself had vanished. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The blossoms overhead swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting silver reflections across hundreds of astonished faces. Aloan stood beneath the glowing branches with her hand resting over the crystal pendant. It continued pulsing softly against her chest. Somehow she knew the howl had been connected to her. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it awakened a strange sense of certainty, as though an invisible path had finally begun revealing itself. Nearby, the Southern scholar carefully opened one of his ancient books. His hands trembled as he turned several fragile pages. There is more, he said quietly. The crowd leaned closer. Even the council members fell silent. The scholar stopped on a page covered with faded symbols and a detailed illustration. It showed a woman standing beneath a flowering silver tree. Around her neck hung a crystal pendant identical to Aloan's. A ripple of shock spread through the gathering. Aloan stared at the image. Every breath caught in her throat. That cannot be real, Edwin Mercer whispered. It is, the scholar replied. This manuscript is over 600 years old. He lowered the book and looked directly at Aloan. The woman in this drawing was called Liriana Mooncrest. The name meant nothing to most of the crowd. It meant everything to Maeve Holloway. The elderly woman suddenly closed her eyes. Her expression carried the weight of decades. I knew it, she whispered. Aloan turned toward her. You know that name? Maeve nodded slowly. My grandmother told me stories when I was a child. Stories most people believed were myths. The old woman stepped closer to the illustration. Liriana Mooncrest was the last known heir of the Silver Line. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. The scholar continued. The Silver Line served as guardians of the ancient tree long before the modern kingdoms existed. Their blood carried a rare connection to the moon goddess and to the ancient magic woven through this land. Aloan felt the pendant pulse harder. Her heartbeat mirrored its rhythm. What happened to them? She asked quietly. The scholar exchanged a glance with Maeve. Neither seemed eager to answer. Finally, Maeve spoke. They disappeared. The simple words felt heavier than any elaborate explanation. Disappeared? Aloan repeated. One generation they were honored, Maeve said. The next, their names vanished from records. Their descendants were scattered. Their history faded into whispers. The scholar pointed toward the illustration. Except the old prophecies always claimed one branch survived. He turned another page. More faded writing appeared beneath elegant silver symbols. He carefully translated the text aloud. When the sleeping branches bloom again, the forgotten blood shall awaken. The crystal shall remember. The guardian line shall return. Silence settled over the crowd. Unlike earlier prophecies, these words felt older, less specific, more believable, more powerful. Then Maeve reached into her cloak and removed a folded letter sealed with silver wax. Aloan's breath caught immediately. She recognized the handwriting before the seal was even broken. Her mother's. Emotions surged through her chest. She asked me to keep this safe, Maeve said softly. Only if the tree ever awakened. Aloan accepted the letter with trembling hands. The paper felt impossibly precious. For a moment she simply stared at it. Then she broke the seal. The familiar handwriting blurred through gathering tears. My dearest Aloan, if you are reading this, then events have unfolded exactly as I prayed they would. First, you must know something I wish I could have told you every day of your life. There was never anything wrong with you. The world may have treated you as though you were missing something. But the truth is that you were carrying something others could not see. There will be people who misunderstand you. There will be people who fear what they do not understand. Do not let their fear become your reflection. Aloan paused, struggling to steady her breathing. Around her, the crowd remained completely silent. She continued reading. Your father and I hid many truths because we believed secrecy would keep you safe. Perhaps we were right. Perhaps we were wrong. But every choice we made came from love. If the crystal has awakened, then you have reached the moment we hoped would never come and prayed would one day arrive. Trust your heart. Trust the light that guides you. And when someone follows that light to find you, do not judge them by power, titles, or stories. Judge them by the kindness they show when they believe no one is watching. Tears slipped down Aloan's cheeks. The final lines nearly stole her breath. You were never forgotten by the moon, my sweet girl. You were protected by it. And no matter what name history gives you, no title the future may bring, you will always be the greatest blessing of my life. Love forever, mother. Aloan lowered the letter slowly. For a moment she could not speak. She could barely breathe. The years of loneliness, the years of doubt, the years spent believing she had been abandoned by fate itself. Suddenly they felt lighter, not erased, but understood. Around her, several villagers wiped away tears. Even those who barely knew her seemed moved by the simple truth contained within the letter. Then the ancient tree responded. The highest blossom opened wider than ever before. Silver light poured across the valley. Hidden within the center of the flower rested a radiant crest unlike anything most people had ever seen. The ancient symbol of the silver line. And as the crest illuminated the darkening sky, Aloan felt the bond inside her heart stir once more. Somewhere beyond the mountains, someone had begun moving toward her. 7 days after the awakening began, the roads leading into Valemore were still crowded with travelers hoping to witness the miracle for themselves. Merchants, scholars, nobles, and curious visitors arrived daily. Yet on the 7th morning, something changed. Before sunrise, every wolf in the territory woke with the same strange feeling. Anticipation. The sensation lingered in the air like the moments before a summer storm. Aloan felt it too. She stood beneath the flowering branches on the hill overlooking the town, watching silver petals drift through the cool morning breeze. The ancient tree had remained in full bloom all week. Day and night, its blossoms glowed softly, transforming the hill into a place that felt suspended between legend and reality. At first, Aloan had struggled to accept everything that had happened. The revelations, the prophecy, her mother's hidden past. Yet each passing day had brought new understanding. She no longer viewed herself as the broken girl everyone once pitied. She was still Aloan Ashcroft, still kind, still quiet, still uncertain about many things. But now she understood that being different had never meant being less. The thought brought an unfamiliar peace. Footsteps approached behind her. Maeve Holloway smiled as she joined her beneath the silver branches. You feel it too. It was not a question. Aloan nodded. Something is coming. Maeve's eyes sparkled knowingly. Someone. Before Aloan could respond, the distant sound of horns echoed across the valley. The signal rolled through the morning air. Once, twice, 3 times. Activity erupted throughout the town below. People hurried into the streets. Shopkeepers stepped outside. Travelers abandoned breakfast tables. Within minutes, hundreds of residents were moving toward the northern road. Aloan's heartbeat quickened. Deep inside her chest, the familiar bond awakened. Stronger than ever before. Not distant now. Close. Very close. The crowd gathered along the road leading toward the hill. Excitement rippled through the valley. Then the royal procession appeared. Black and silver banners fluttered above a line of riders moving steadily toward Valemore. Sunlight reflected from polished armor. Royal guards guided their horses calmly through the crowd. Yet despite the impressive escort, every eye focused on the figure riding at the center. Kaelin Dravenhart. The Alpha King had crossed mountains, rivers, and kingdoms to reach this place. As his horse approached the hill, the pendant around Aloan's neck began glowing brightly. The reaction did not go unnoticed. Gasps spread through the crowd. Kaelin felt it too. The moment his gaze found hers, he slowed to a stop. For several heartbeats, neither moved. The bond between them settled into place with quiet certainty. Not explosive, not overwhelming, simply right. The Alpha King dismounted and began walking toward the hill alone. His advisors remained behind. His guards remained behind. Even the crowd seemed to instinctively step aside. The distance between him and Aloan gradually disappeared. She felt strangely calm. The fear she once expected to feel was nowhere to be found. Instead, she felt recognition. like finally meeting someone she had somehow known for years. Kaelin stopped before her beneath the silver blossoms. Around them, the valley remained silent. Hundreds watched. Nobody spoke. The king studied her for a long moment. Not her pendant. Not the tree. Her. The girl everyone had overlooked. The girl everyone had underestimated. Then something happened that no one present would ever forget. Kaelin placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head. The gesture was simple, respectful, genuine. A king honoring another person's worth. Shock rippled through the crowd. Several nobles stared in disbelief. Others exchanged stunned looks. Yet Kaelin never seemed to notice their reaction. "Eloan Ashcroft," he said quietly. His voice carried clearly through the silent valley. "For years I believed the moon goddess had forgotten me." Emotion tightened his expression briefly. "I was wrong." Eloan felt tears gathering in her eyes. Not from sadness. Relief. For so long, she had carried loneliness as though it were part of her identity. Now she finally understood it had only been a chapter, not the entire story. Above them, the blossoms brightened. Thousands of silver petals drifted through the air. Children laughed as they swirled around the hill. Elders watched with tears in their eyes. Even Rowan Blackthorn stood silently among the crowd, humbled by everything he had witnessed. Then the highest branch of the ancient tree released one final burst of silver light. The crest of the lost silver line appeared among the blossoms, shining brilliantly against the morning sky. Cheers erupted throughout the valley. Not because a prophecy had been fulfilled, not because a king had arrived, because the girl who had spent years believing she did not belong had finally found her place. As silver petals danced across the kingdom, Eloan looked toward the horizon beyond the mountains. The future remained unwritten. Adventures waited ahead. Mysteries still remained. But for the first time in her life, she welcomed them. And above her, the ancient tree continued to bloom, as though it had waited 500 years for this single moment.